What if I told you that one single man inspired some of the most famous horror movie villains of all time? The quiet man from a small town who later became the shadow behind Psycho, Texas Chainsaw Massacre, and Silence of the Lambs. His name was Ed Gein. At first glance, he looked like an ordinary farmer, but behind closed doors, he was hiding something so disturbing that it shocked the whole world. His crimes were so strange and terrifying that even Hollywood couldn't ignore them. They used his story to shape some of the darkest characters in film history. But here's the real question. Was Ed Gein simply born evil, or was he shaped by the twisted life he lived? Keep watching, because this is the story of Ed Gein, the man who became America's real-life monster. Ed Gein was born in 1906 in a small town called Plainfield, Wisconsin. His childhood was far from normal. His mother, Augusta, was very strict and deeply religious. She believed that almost all women were sinful and evil, except for herself. She spent years drilling this belief into Ed and his brother, warning them to stay away from people, especially women. Ed's father, George, was the complete opposite. He was an alcoholic who rarely stood up to Augusta. He had little influence in the home, leaving Augusta in full control. This meant Ed grew up with almost no balance, hearing only his mother's harsh teachings every single day. Because of this, Ed lived a very isolated life. He had no close friends and spent most of his time on the family farm. He became shy, socially awkward, and completely devoted to his mother. Psychologists later said this strict control and loneliness damaged his ability to form healthy relationships, shaping the troubled man he would one day become. Life for Ed Gein grew even darker as he grew older. First, his father died after years of heavy drinking. Then, in 1944, his brother Henry also died under strange conditions. Some people even wondered if Ed had a hand in it, though nothing was ever proven. But the biggest blow came in 1945, when his mother Augusta passed away. For Ed, this was the breaking point. She had been the center of his world, the only person he truly cared about. Without her, Ed was left completely alone. His grief was so deep that he began treating the family house like a shrine. He boarded up most of the rooms to keep them exactly as his mother had left them. While those rooms stayed clean and untouched, Ed lived in the rest of the house in terrible filth, surrounded by dirt and decay. After his mother's death, Ed Gein became even more withdrawn from the world. He spent long hours reading disturbing books and magazines. These included stories about death cults, Nazi experiments, and human anatomy. The more he read, the more his obsession with death and the human body grew. Before long, Ed began sneaking into local graveyards at night. He would dig up recently buried women who reminded him of his mother. From their bodies, he created horrifying trophies. Police later found furniture made from bones, bowls made from skulls, masks and lampshades made of human skin, and even a skin suit that Ed would wear. He admitted he wanted to become his mother by dressing in the skin of other women. In 1954, a woman named Mary Hogan, who owned a local tavern, suddenly disappeared. No one knew what happened to her, and for years the case remained a mystery. Strangely, some people in town even joked that Ed Gein might have been involved. He lived nearby and was known for being odd, though many thought of him as harmless. Ed himself sometimes made chilling comments about Mary's disappearance, almost as if he wanted people to guess the truth. Most brushed it off as weird talk, but the truth was far worse than anyone imagined. Years later, when police searched his house, they discovered Mary's remains among his terrifying collection of human trophies. Psychologists believe this was the moment when Ed moved from fantasy to action. Grave robbing and imagination were no longer enough. He had crossed the line into real murder. And then, 3 years later, Ed Gein's mask of secrecy finally cracked. On November 16, 1957, the small town of Plainfield was shaken once again. Bernice Warden, the owner of the local hardware store, suddenly vanished. Her son, Frank Warden, grew worried when he found the store empty and his mother gone. But what truly alarmed him was the trail of blood that led out the back door. Suspicion quickly turned toward Ed Gein, who had been seen at the store the night before. When the police went to Ed's farmhouse, they followed the bloody trail and made a shocking discovery. Inside his shed, they found the lifeless body of Bernice Worden. But that was only the beginning. Once they entered the house, they uncovered what would later be called a house of horrors. There were human heads used as decorations, bowls made from skulls, masks stitched together from skin, and even the infamous skin suit that Ed admitted to wearing. The officers who stepped inside were horrified. Many could not believe what they had seen with their own eyes. It was like walking into a nightmare, something no one in the quiet town of Plainfield ever thought possible. The police couldn't believe what they had walked into. It was straight out of a nightmare. When police searched Ed Gein's farmhouse in 1957, they uncovered sights that still shock people today. The small, run-down house was filled with items no one could ever imagine. Chairs were upholstered with human skin. Skulls had been turned into bowls. Masks made from faces were hanging like decorations on the walls. Police also found female torsos and even jars that held human organs, including hearts. During questioning, Ed admitted that many of these came from grave robbing. He told police he had dug up bodies dozens of times, often searching for women who looked like his mother. But he also confessed to 2 murders, Mary Hogan and Bernice Worden. His obsession with death and his fantasies had fully taken over his life, turning his imagination into terrifying reality. Ed's crimes were a mix of deep compulsion and a fantasy world that he could no longer control. But the question still remains, was Ed Gein truly insane, or did he know exactly what he was doing? After his arrest, doctors declared Ed Gein legally insane. Instead of going straight to prison, he was sent to Central State Hospital, where he lived under strict care. Years later, in 1968, doctors ruled that he was mentally fit to stand trial. He was found guilty of murder, but because of his mental state, he was still kept in institutions rather than a normal prison. Ed lived the rest of his life locked away, and in 1984, he died of cancer at the age of 77. Even though Ed spent most of his life hidden behind hospital walls, his crimes had a lasting effect far beyond Plainfield. Hollywood writers used his story as the seed for some of the most famous horror villains of all time. Norman Bates in Psycho, Leatherface in the Texas Chainsaw Massacre, and Buffalo Bill in The Silence of the Lambs all drew inspiration from Ed Gein's dark life. But beyond the world of movies and pop culture, the bigger question still lingers. What does Ed Gein's mind really tell us about the nature of evil? Experts have studied Ed Gein's mind for decades, trying to understand what made him commit such strange and horrifying acts. Many believe he may have suffered from schizophrenia or another form of psychosis, which caused him to lose touch with reality. He often lived in a fantasy world where he imagined he could bring his mother back or even become her through his disturbing creations. Another clear part of his psychology was necrophilia, a dark attraction to the dead. Instead of forming normal relationships with living people, Ed turned to graves and bodies. This was linked to his extreme attachment to his mother, who taught him that most women were evil. When she died, he could not form a healthy bond with anyone else, so he turned his grief into obsession. Ed Gein wasn't just a killer. He became a mirror of what happens when trauma, obsession, and isolation eat away at the human mind. His story still haunts people because it forces us to ask one big question. Was he truly born evil, or was he created by the world around him? Some see him as a monster, others as a broken man shaped by pain and loss. What do you think? Share your thoughts in the comments below, and don't forget to like, subscribe. See ya.